Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. Welcome to the inaugural legislative forum held by the State Bar of Georgia. It's high time we had one, and we're having it, and we appreciate your attendance and your interest. We thank our panelists, first of all, and our chairman, Nick Mortakis, is going to introduce each panelist. But each panelist is a representative or senator and a lawyer. And they have graciously given up their free afternoon to be with us and discuss the important issues with us this afternoon. And thank you, panelists. And please, let's give them a warm State Bar of Georgia welcome. I often say this when I am speaking to groups on behalf of the State Bar, and that is decisions are made by those who show up. Decisions are made by those who show up. These folks here show up every day, and you've shown up today, and we appreciate it. And it shows how important the issues are and your interest is, and it shows that the State Bar of Georgia is involved in what goes on at the General Assembly, and we care about it, and we want to be supportive of our lawyer legislators and all of our legislators. But thank you for being here. Your presence speaks volumes, and we appreciate it. I want to take one moment before we begin and introduce our lobbying team for the State Bar of Georgia. Session starts on Monday, as you know, and we have an incredible team put together for us. And I'm very proud of them, and I believe we'll have one of the strongest presences at the General Assembly this year. First is Rusty Sewell, and I would ask each person to stand up and just acknowledge so everyone can look and see there's Rusty in the back. I want you to know who these folks are and know that you can call them when you need to. Rusty Sewell has been with us for a long time. He's with Capital Partners, and he is our quarterback, and we appreciate it, and thank you, Rusty. Also with us is Jim Collins. There's Jim. Charlie Tanksley. Charlie was in a mediation today and may not have been able to get here yet, but when I see him, I'll introduce you to him. Charlie Tanksley. Roy Robinson. There's Roy. Meredith Weaver. Thank you, Meredith. That's our lobbying team. And we've added a new person called a grassroots coordinator, Zach Johnson. Where are you, Zach? There's Zach. And you'll be hearing from Zach more because part of his job is going to be able to get you to the Capitol, get you down to the General Assembly, to be a resource, to see what's going on, to watch these folks work and do their jobs, and offer yourself as a resource from the State Bar. So when Zach contacts you, please take his call and say, yes, I'd like to help out in any way. Before I turn it over to our chairperson, Nick Mortakis, I want to acknowledge that the Attorney General of the state of Georgia, Sam Olens, is with us today. Can you welcome the Attorney General? Again, thank you for being here. It's going to be a wonderful afternoon. You'll have a chance to ask questions, as Nick is going to explain. And on behalf of the State Bar, I just want to thank you for being here. Our chairperson is Nick Mortakis. Many of you know him. He's a lawyer here in Atlanta. His firm is Mortakis and Cushell here in Buckhead. And Nick has a great political experience and in fact served in the House of Representatives for the state of Georgia in 2003 and 2004 from the 42nd House for the 42nd House District. We're lucky to have Nick. He's such a resource. And Nick now chairs our Advisory Committee on Legislation, the ACL, which I believe is one of our most important committees for the State Bar. It does some incredible work. So I will now turn it over to Chairman Nick Mortakis.
Thank you very much, Robin, and thanks to all of you. It is indeed a great showing for the inaugural effort at this forum. And Robin told me sent me an email and said, since this is our first one, it better be a success. I said, well, thanks, Robin. I appreciate the pressure. Let me tell you a little bit. It's my honor to serve as the chairman of the Advisory Committee on Legislation and to work with our lobbyists and these nice folks. I want to talk to you, first of all, let me say to the members of the legislature that we appreciate having you today. We know the session starts Monday. It's a busy time. And if the Journal-Constitution is to be believed, y'all would normally be fundraising today, but we really do appreciate everything you do. And as a former lawyer legislator, I know how hard it is. We'll talk about that a little later. I want to ask y'all some questions about that. We're going to be covering a number of broad issues, ladies and gentlemen, and they're not necessarily issues which the bar takes a position in. You know, under our rules and the Keller standard of germaneness, our bar is limited in the issues that it can take positions on. So don't think just because you're going to hear some discussion today about what are broad public interest issues, as well as those that are particular to us as lawyers, that it's something that the bar is actively involved in. It's part of the service that we want to provide to let these legislators talk to you and answer your questions about the important issues of the day. We do have, the Advisory Committee on Legislation has had meetings, solicited from the various sections, proposals on matters which are of particular interest to the bar, and we have 10 pieces of proposed legislation, which 5 of which have already been submitted to the Board of Governors, the other 5 which will be submitted for approval tomorrow, where we will be seeking legislation. And as we talk about the issues today, some of those I'm sure will come up. So what I'm going to do is we've asked each panelist to take a minute to begin, a few minutes to talk about whatever issue they would like to bring up. So use that as food for thought. And if you have some questions later, once each one is introduced and speaks to the issue of importance to them today, we would encourage you, there's 2 mics, to come to the mic and ask questions. Feel free at any time to do that, okay? And I'll recognize you as soon as I can thereafter. So let's let each legislator talk about the issue they want to speak about, and then at any time thereafter, feel free to come up to the mic. And here's Wendell Willard, our delinquent chairman of the Judiciary Committee. That's right. Come on in. We won't. All right.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm going to start at the far end and first introduce. I've got fairly brief introductions of each person, and after I do that, if you take a minute to speak to an issue that you'd like to talk about, Senator Jason Carter. Far right, all of these folks, as you know, are lawyers. Senator Carter is from DeKalb County, District 42. In his professional career, he works for Bondurant, Mixon, and Elmore, who we all know. Prior to joining that firm, he was a law clerk with the Honorable Frank Mays Hull in the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. Jason's active in many aspects of community service and sits on a number of boards, including the DeKalb Women's Resource Center to End Domestic Violence, the Georgia After School Investment Council, and the Carter Center. There is a connection there, obviously. Jason also served in the Peace Corps. As a Peace Corps volunteer in South Africa, he's active in many aspects of the Peace Corps' continuing mission. He's written a book about South Africa and has published articles in many legal issues. Received his law degree, summa cum laude, from the University of Georgia and his undergraduate degree from Duke University. Jason and his wife, Kate, have 2 young sons. So please welcome Jason Carter.
Thank you. I appreciate Mr. Moritakis' introduction, and I also appreciate being able to go first. They have arranged folks from the people who know the least on this end and the people who know the most down there, so that the people, we get to talk what we get to talk about, and they have to pick whatever's left down there for Representative Lindsey. I want to say one thing about my Senate district. It is DeKalb County, the city of Atlanta and DeKalb, the city of Decatur, Emory University, the CDC, I think, although it's hard to prove, that I represent more lawyers than any other state senator. And I'm almost as sure that I represent more doctors than any other state senator.
No.
So I have had a good time doing that. Two of the lawyers that I represent, I wanted to acknowledge. Stephanie Benfield is here, and Mary Margaret Oliver is here. And Mary Margaret really should be up here as a lawyer legislator who can certainly answer the questions that those of us up here cannot. So I just wanted to say hello. I really just wanted to say one thing more less about substance and more about my experience in the legislature, and it has been this. I came into the Senate as a relatively high-profile Democrat in a Republican-dominated body, and the personal relationships that I have developed and the way in which your legislature goes about its business has so far exceeded my expectations that I feel like y'all should know that. And they were somewhat low expectations, that's true, but there's not a person sitting up here, Republican or Democrat, that I have not worked with on an issue of substance and that hasn't given me what I felt like was a fair shake. And I think the lawyers in the legislature really lead that collegiality. And I'll say this, that is what I've just described to you is true about 95% of the time. 5% of the time, yes, there's partisan politics. You can't get over it. You can't do anything about it. And those are the things that get in the newspaper and that give politicians a bad name. And they earn it and we earn it to some extent. But you should know that 95% of the time, your legislature has got a lot of good people down there trying to do the right thing. And I think the lawyers that are down there, almost to a person, are really there to lead that charge. So you shouldn't feel alienated from your legislature, particularly as lawyers. Last substantive thing I'll say is the budget is the most important thing that we do every year. Today, Georgia collects fewer taxes as a state than any other state but one or two. We spend less per capita than any other state but one or two. And that has been a bipartisan tradition in Georgia, that fiscal responsibility. I think Jimmy Carter was probably the most fiscally conservative governor in the history of the state. And I think what has happened, though, is sometimes we have the conservative ideal of having a small but effective government has become, let's have a small government at all costs. And whether or not we are properly funding the judiciary, whether or not we're properly funding or rating the education funds, I think are things that we need to consider and think about. And I'm looking forward to what I understand will be a discussion about our budget and how it operates. So I thought that's an important thing to note, and I'll pass it on. Thank you for letting me be here, and I'm honored to be here.
Thank you very much, Jason. Senator Carter. Our next panelist is Senator Bill Cowsert, a Republican from Athens. He was elected to the Senate in 2006, serves District 46. That's citizens in Oconee and portions of Clark and Walton counties. Senator Cowsert previously served as Vice Chairman of the Senate Higher Education Committee and a member of Appropriations, Judiciary, Reapportionment, Redistricting, Natural Resources, and the Environment, and Special Judiciary Committees. He graduated from Presbyterian College, earned his law degree from University of Georgia. He's a partner in his law firm of Cowsert and Avery, past president of the Athens Sertoma Club and Clark County Heart Association, and he's also a board member of the Athens Touchdown Club. Senator Cowsert and his wife Amy are the parents of 3 children and are members of the First Presbyterian Church of Athens, where Senator Cowsert serves as a Sunday school teacher. So please welcome Bill Cowsert.
Thank you. I thought today I would mention one thing on the program here as lawyers in the legislature, lawyer involvement, and just tell you a little bit of my perspective on that and give you some tidbits of how that works. The general public assumes that about 50% of the legislators are attorneys, and it couldn't be farther from the truth. There are 56 senators and only 10 of us are attorneys. Out of those 10, a good number don't really actively practice law. They're either just working in a corporation or not using their law degree to earn a living. So it's a much smaller number than you would imagine. And I think in the House, these guys can tell you in a minute, but they got in the low 20s out of 180 people. So you're really talking about a small representation that we have. It gives us probably a lot more say-so than we are entitled to. Other legislators assume that we know more about law than they do just because we're lawyers. And if you think about it, you don't really sit there and study legislation all day in your law practices. It's really not that common. If I do mostly litigation, and you may bounce around the evidence code a little bit, but you pretty much know it like the back of your hand if you're trying many cases and you know the tort law. So unless it's a specific statute that you're looking for, we don't really use that skill in the practice of law. But don't tell our fellow senators and representatives, because they look up to us, and they'll come ask you to look at a bill for them and help them, and it gives us probably a little undue influence, more than we're entitled to anyway. But it's a rewarding experience, and it's something that our skill set as attorneys lends itself to. It's a very detail-oriented job to look at the fine print of the bills, and they give me a hard time sometimes. Right off the Senate floor is the President Pro Tem's office, and he has a set of the Georgia Code in there. And it's rarely a day that goes by when we're on the floor looking at legislation that I don't trot in there and grab a code section and bring it back in and look it up, because so many of our bills that we're passing will reference another code section. And it's just like when you're sitting there reading the code, it doesn't make any sense to you unless you take it in context and how it interrelates with other parts. And so, I'm trotting back and forth, looking up the codes of other relevant statutes and how they may be impacted by our legislation. And it's a good skill set for us to know your way around the books, around the code. And it's also sort of inherent in our nature to weigh evidence, particularly if you're in the litigation world out there. We are used to hearing the evidence pro and con on everything and weighing it and hearing it out and sorting it and making a determination or a judgment after doing that. And that's a really necessary skill in the legislative process as we're working these bills through the system, through the committee process in particular. You hear testimony from different people. You know what to ask them, what to look at the pros and the cons before you make up your mind which way to go. Jason is right that we're bipartisan. It might be the only time he is introduced as the person on the far right. I don't think you're going to see that often, but it is incredible the number of bills that we have that in the Senate, with the 56 votes that will pass 52-3, 46-8. I mean, they're overwhelmingly bipartisan, the bills that pass, and you get down to maybe less than 10% of them where there's a partisan, philosophical, ideological divide or something where you break down by party lines, but that really doesn't happen much at all. And some of the most important work we do is in the committees, and of course all of us serve on the Judiciary Committee. It doesn't matter whether you got a D or an R, we're all sorting it out through our own experiences and how things work, and I don't think that anybody is silenced in any way or negated based on their party affiliation. I remember being very impressed with Kasim Reed when he was on the Judiciary Committee when I came in as a freshman, and he understood that he probably wasn't going to carry a bill or sponsor a bill and get it passed under his name, being in the minority party, but he had just as much influence in crafting the legislation in the committee process as any other member of the committee did. Was really bright, talented legislator in the way he did that, and I learned quite a bit from him. I don't see any of my law partners here today. We have 8 lawyers in my firm in Athens, but I owe a thanks to them, Craig Avery and my other partners, that allow me to do this, to sort of pursue this passion and engage in what's almost like a hobby to me. Everybody up here, I'm sure, is in down deep some type of a political geek. We like the process, we like politics, and it's really a privilege to be given the chance to serve in the legislature and do that, and you can't do it unless your partners will cover for you and give you the leniency to be away from your practice some. And so any of you who have partners that are thinking about running for the legislature, encourage them. Let them do it. It's not going to make you any money. It's going to cost you money, but it's going to help our state. We need good, smart, diligent attorneys to serve in the legislature. And I tease my wife that she's like, you're never home, you're always working, it's either politics or work. And I mean, your lives as lawyers, how it's pretty, there's no limit to the number of hours you can work if you let yourself do it. And I joke and say I really do 12 months of law in 9 months, and we're gone for the 3 months, but you really never stop with technology and your laptops and iPads and everything. You can keep in touch with your office, and you do it, and you can keep your practice going, especially if you have partners. And I guess my final comment is I find it to be refreshing. It's nice to take a break from that, 24/7 law practice for the 40 days and 80 nights, they call it, that we're in Atlanta. And I find that when I get back to my law practice, I'm a little bit revived and refreshed to do that, after having had some time it's almost a little baby sabbatical, every winter. And then I find the same thing, like right about now, I'm really anxious. We start back Monday to get back to the legislature, because it's good that you're a citizen legislator. You're not full-time. It's just the winter months, and it keeps you refreshed on both of those counts. So it's a neat experience. I would encourage you to think about running for office at whatever level, and if you're not crazy enough to do that, be lenient with your partners. Encourage them to participate in the process, because it strengthens our government. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. And to put it in perspective, you raised a couple of interesting points as it relates to lawyers. So out of 236 legislators, there's 30 some odd lawyers, right? And the other thing, at least I found, is that you'll oftentimes hear people go to the well and talk about, oh, this is just another lawyer's bill, or you'll hear some derogatory comment about it. But the truth of the matter is, whenever anybody needs help with bills, they call the lawyers, right? And as a result, you find yourself pulled into a lot of issues that you otherwise might not think you'd be pulled into. We all agree. Y'all agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so you do serve a great service, and it does take away a lot from your practice. All righty, our next senator is Senator Josh McKoon. Senator McKoon is from Columbus. He was first elected to the state Senate in 2010. He has previously served as a member on the Banking and Financial Institutions, Ethics, Insurance, Labor and Judiciary, Regulated Industries and Utilities, and Special Judiciary Committees. Senator McKoon earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Furman University and a Juris Doctor from the University of Alabama in 2003. Senator McKoon currently works as an attorney for Day Crowley PC, serves on the board of directors of United Way of the Chattahoochee Valley, the Muskogee County Juvenile Drug Court, Big Brothers Big Sisters Association of Greater Columbus, Urban League of Greater Columbus. He's also a member of the Rotary Club, State Bar, the Alabama Bar, the Knights of Columbus Council at St. Anne's Church, where he attends services. So please welcome Senator Josh McKoon.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here with you today. I would certainly associate myself with the comments you have heard about the bipartisan nature of our work, and I have tremendous respect for all of my colleagues that are here with me today. They told us to take a few minutes to speak on an issue that's important to us. Those of you that know me probably know that my issue that I'm interested in talking to you about today is ethics reform. A lot of people ask me, why is that an important issue? We have transportation and infrastructure issues in this state. We have education issues. We have health care concerns. So why would we spend so much time, particularly in a part-time legislature where there is a limited amount of time to address different issues on ethics? And I would say that it is because in order to properly function, government has to have some measure of trust from the people who are being governed. And I think we've had a tremendous credibility gap that's been created over the years. And it's not, I always offer this sort of caveat. The folks that I serve with are good folks that are here for the right reason. And the lobbyists that work in this system are essential. I think it's appropriate that the team for the State Bar was recognized at the beginning of this program in a part-time legislature. Lobbyists are absolutely essential to the process. But where we are in Georgia is we're one of 3 states in the nation that in no way regulates giving from lobbyists to the members of the General Assembly. We're a state that the Center for Public Integrity is ranked 50th in the nation when it comes to our ethics laws. And so clearly it's something we need to pay attention to, not because we've had some terrible thing happen in the recent past, but because we don't want something terrible to happen in the future. a lot of the states that are ranked ahead of us, Illinois, they had several governors that went to prison. Alabama had a terrible scandal involving gambling. You know, we don't want to wait for there to be an issue like that. We want to be proactive in dealing with it. And I'll just mention a few of the ways in which I think we can deal with it. One is to simply offer a cap on the gifts that are offered. A number of states have done this, most recently Louisiana. We've looked at a number of states, including Washington State, that have had a great deal of success with it. Restoring the rulemaking authority of the commission. You know, most administrative agencies in this state have some degree of ability to promulgate rules, to be able to carry forward the intention of the statutes that the General Assembly passes. The commission does not have that authority, and it creates tremendous problems. Just yesterday, I can't say every registered lobbyist in the state, but I know a lot of them got notices that they were in violation of their filing requirement. And it was a technical glitch in the system, but they've got to address it. The commission has to address it. And I think we need to give them the tools necessary to address those issues as they come up. We took local office holders, Board of Education members, city councilors, all over the state, literally thousands of public officials, and put them into a statewide electronic filing system that simply was not designed for the volume of filings that are taking place. And so people really, through no fault of their own, either not being familiar with technology or having other issues, are not filing. And so we're not getting the transparency in the system that we need. And I think we need to restore our local filing officers so that we can take care of that. And then finally, there are two constitutional amendments that I've proposed this session that kind of go to this issue. One would dedicate funding to the commission. The commission has a staff of 12. It has, in my view, technology that is quite outdated. And a big part of the problem is they simply don't have the funding necessary to hire the staff they need and to provide the technology that's required to carry forward their mission. And finally, I've offered a constitutional amendment that would empower the Attorney General to convene a statewide grand jury. And this is an idea that's not new. It's certainly not original to me. I believe it's something that's been around at least since the 1980s. And it's something that would do an awful lot to provide an important tool to investigate allegations of corruption and potential abuse. And so these are all things that I hope that we will spend some time thinking about and talking about during the upcoming legislative session. It is a great honor to be able to serve in the General Assembly. I too have partners that make it possible for me to do that, and I'm tremendously grateful to them. And again, I appreciate the invitation to be here and look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Senator. Next is Senator Jesse Stone, and I know these introductions cover a broad range, but I think it's important that we see just how active and well-rounded these folks who give so much of their time are. Senator Jesse Stone's from Waynesboro, Georgia. He's a Republican representing the 23rd District. He was first elected in 2010, previously served on the Banking and Financial Institutions, Education and Youth, Higher Education and Judiciary Committee. He served as the mayor of Waynesboro from 2003 to 2007. Since 2003, he's been a member of the Central Savannah River Area RDC Board. He serves on the Burke County Health Department Board, Waynesboro Historic Preservation Commission, Waynesboro Downtown Development Authority. From a personal standpoint, Senator Stone is a lawyer in the firm of Merrill and Stone. He received his MBA and law degree from the University of Georgia. Senator Stone and his wife Amanda are Episcopalian. They have 3 children and live in Waynesboro. So welcome, please welcome Senator Jesse Stone.
Thank you very much for inviting me to join in this panel. It's great to be among fellow members of the bar and to share ideas. I really want to thank the bar for some of the things that make it possible for us to be public servants. The bar has been very flexible in the area of continuing legal education. by allowing some latitude there and also by giving some encouragement for us to participate. So this is something, little things like that mean a lot to us because all of us here are sacrificing to be here. We enjoy it immensely, otherwise we would not be involved. And I want to echo several things that were on my mind that were covered, but I want to emphasize them. I want to challenge and encourage all of you to get involved with local government. I know it's not easy or you know, the opportunities don't always arise, but you will not realize how much good you can do. I particularly enjoyed being in local government and in the drafting of ordinances, and of course that was helpful in giving me a perspective as a legislator. I want to also say that Senator Cowsert hit the nail on the head when he said the session is like a sabbatical. I have used that description many times. It is a break from our practice. It expands our horizons. It forces us out of our boxes because we all tend to specialize in our areas of practice. And it does refresh, and we do look forward to coming back to our law practices. And your cooperation as members of the bar, because I know it's an inconvenience to some, especially people who we are working through litigation with, to wait while we're up here doing the people's work. But we depend on your cooperation in many ways. We call upon you. I call upon my partners who practice in areas that I don't to get their review of proposals that are outside my experience in the practice of law, and I call upon members of the bar in my community. My community, for those of you who don't know where Waynesboro is, encompasses most of metropolitan Augusta. It's an 11-county district in east central Georgia, and it is a challenge to cover, to represent the diverse interests in such a large district, but it tends to open you up to differing ideas. As lawyers, I think in the legislature, we tend to be the moderating influence. You don't see too many ideologues in the lawyer legislators. We are the problem solvers. People come to us, as you've heard, for advice, and we do a lot of screening out bad legislation and improving legislation as it works its way through the process. We are very active in our committees. The Judiciary Committee is very active, one of the most active committees in the legislature on both sides, House and the Senate. And we do work very well together, and you probably could not distinguish our party affiliations if you sat in on a Judiciary Committee hearing. We zero in on the real issues, the real problems, and try to improve the product so that we have better laws for all the citizens. We are, as lawyers, we have a special advantage over some of our legislators because we can identify allies in the other house. And it's very easy to find people to carry our bills in the House. As a senator, I've established many good relationships with lawyers in the House, and likewise, we carry bills for our fellow House lawyer legislators. And some of the major litigation that comes through the legislature is sponsored by lawyers, and the people on this panel can, if they weren't modest, could tell you about some of the important legislation that has affected not just the legal profession, but all Georgians. One thing we are, over the years, I think everybody's become a fiscal conservative regardless of political affiliation. And that, interestingly, has driven reform in many areas, surprisingly so. Criminal justice reform is one area that you've all witnessed an unfolding process. We'll see more of that in the coming session, maybe not so much, but fine-tuning what we've started in play. Juvenile justice reform, I won't go into that, but that's something that I've been honored to have the opportunity to work with Chairman Willard on. I think the time may be right for that. That's an important piece of legislation that may come out of this session, we hope. But again, I want to thank y'all for being here, and I think this is a good exercise, a good opportunity for interchange, and look forward to talking with y'all individually.
Thank you very much, Senator. Our next panelist is Representative Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams is the House Minority Leader for the Georgia General Assembly and represents the 89th District. She is the first woman to lead either party in the Georgia General Assembly and the first African American to be a leader in the House of Representatives. Representative Abrams previously served on Appropriations, Ethics, Judiciary, Non-Civil, Rules, and Ways and Means. She co-founded and acts as Senior Vice President of Now Account Network Corporation, a financial services firm, co-founded Nourish, Inc., a beverage company with a focus on infants and toddlers, as well as other entrepreneurial ventures. She was formerly a deputy city attorney for the city of Atlanta, and prior to that, she served as a special tax counsel at Sutherland with a focus on tax-exempt organizations, healthcare, and public finance. Stacey, in 2012, received the John F. Kennedy New Frontier Award, which honors elected officials under 40 whose work demonstrates the impact of elective public service as a way to address public challenges. She is under the pen name, this is an interesting fact, of Selena Montgomery. This is in case the legislature ever doesn't work for her. She's an award-winning author of 8 romantic suspense novels. We'll have to get some of those.
Yes, please.
She currently serves on the board of trustees for Agnes Scott College, the board of directors for the Gateway Center for the Homeless. She received her JD degree from Yale Law School. She received a degree from the LBJ Public Affairs School at the University of Texas and earned a BA in Interdisciplinary Studies from Spelman College, magna cum laude. So please welcome Stacey Abrams.
Thank you. And my books are available on Amazon.com. And actually, I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege and job protection and acknowledge the members of the House Caucus who are here, Representative Mary Margaret Oliver, Representative Carol Fullerton, Representative-elect Ronnie Mabra, and sadly for 3 more days, Representative Stephanie Stuckey-Benfield. I think that the senators have wisely, I think, encompassed a number of the issues, and I will reserve the political part of what I want to say until there are questions. I would want to point out 3 things. One, I think it's critical for us to remember that lawyers operate most frequently as issue spotters, and it is in that function that this body can be most helpful. I've seen a lot of you in Judiciary Non-Civil. I don't see as many of you in Ways and Means, and that's a problem. And there are other committees at the Capitol where the presence of attorneys can highlight and illuminate issues long before legislators notice that there's a problem. Because your daily practice involves understanding and really contemplating the effect of what we do, I think it's critical for the bar to be much more present in the day-to-day lives that we live as legislators. We, I think, begin with the best intention, but somewhere along the way, sometimes we get a bit confused. And so I think the role that the bar can play is helping bring us back to where we begin, which is with good intention, but recognizing that lawmaking is a difficult and often contentious and complicated process. And so having your eyes and ears can be very critical. I agree with Senator Stone. My proudest job as a lawyer was as Deputy City Attorney for the City of Atlanta. I think there's a nobility to writing law. And having served in the function of not only writing law for the City of Atlanta, but keeping politicians out of jail, I think that was a full-time job, but successfully done. I think it's critical for us to remember that as members of the bar, we're also called upon to be active citizens in our community. And that means beyond running for office, finding ways to serve both as elected officials, but also finding ways to bring ourselves and bring our skills to the table. So certainly coming to the Capitol to help us, but also going to those small communities where they may not have a city attorney or a county attorney, but do need assistance. That is, I think, a noble role that we can play that too often we do not engage simply because we don't think about it. The third thing I would say is that the role that I play as minority leader, and certainly with the largesse of my colleagues who were kind enough to elect me to this role, I think the role the minority has to play is that of the loyal opposition. And I would echo Senator Carter in his concern about how our fiscal conservatism has started to strangle our service to the citizens of Georgia. I'm fond of saying that Georgians don't care whether you're Democrat or Republican, they care whether you care about them. And I think that's our obligation. And so my role and the ethic I take when I am serving in my role as leader is to move us towards collaborating wherever we can. That is how you get to 180 votes in the House and 56 votes in the Senate. That's how you get to complicated, thorny issues, not overwhelming the goal, which is what we've been able to do on a number of, I think, critical pieces of legislation over the last few years. But we also have an obligation to compete. We have an obligation to lift up the ideas and the ideals of our party and to say that here's another way to operate. And that often comes not simply from the ideology of our party, but from the voices of our citizens. And so I need more members and I need more help, so please help me. So if you have ideas, bring them to us. Because when we can collaborate effectively, but also compete with thoughtful ideas that move the debate forward, we move Georgia forward. And I think more than anything, the common bond that those of us sitting at this table have is that we want to use the skills that we've acquired as lawyers to serve Georgia and to serve Georgia's people. And so thank you for letting us come to talk to you today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Abrams. And you mentioned about something that I think is important to our current president, that we're starting with this grassroots effort. That's the purpose. I mean, we are your home. We're your friends. We're there for you. So Zach, the head of our grassroots effort, who was introduced earlier, will be available, and you need to let us know what you need us to do, and that's an effort we're really going to begin to make. Mr. Chairman, Wendell, I'm going to skip you because I'm going by the list as it was presented. Okay. Not only were you late, but you sat in the wrong seat. So when I served on your committee, I couldn't talk to you that way. But so
I thought no one would sit next to her.
I'm going to go to Rich Golick. Representative Golick from Cobb County is serving his 7th term in the Georgia House. He's a Republican. He represents the 34th State House District. He serves as chairman of the Non-Civil Judiciary Committee. He's on the Insurance Committee, the Retirement Committee, the Appropriations Committee, vice chairman of the Rules Committee. He served as Governor Sonny Perdue's senior administrative floor leader in the Senate for 5 years. Rich is a graduate of Emory University with a degree in political science, a law degree from Georgia State. During law school summers, Rich served as a law clerk in the criminal division of the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. during the George H.W. Bush administration. He clerked in the criminal division of the U.S. Attorney's Office. Prior to his election, Rich served as legislative aide to the Senate Special Judiciary Committee, as well as a special counsel to the Senate Republican Caucus. During his tenure in the House, Rich has been recognized by various groups for his legislative achievements, including the Georgia District Attorneys Association, the Georgia Association of Educators, Georgia Hospital Association, Georgia Conservation Voters, among others, as well as Georgia Watch. Georgia Watch, Georgia's premier consumer watchdog, recognized Rich in 2008 as Legislator of the Year. Rich is a member of the Cobb Chamber of Commerce, Friends of the Smyrna Library, Smyrna Vinings Ducks Unlimited, among other groups. In the private sector, he works as Southeast Regional Counsel for Allstate Insurance Company, is married to Maria Golick, a Cobb County State Court judge, and they have 2 sons. Please welcome Representative Rich Golick.
Thank you, Nick. With that, thank you. I'll say thank you, and that's to thank you for the State Bar being the terrific resource that it is. In the past few years, I've had some issues on the non-civil committee that have been must-dos. They've been occasionally contentious. A lot of emotion and passion gets stirred up, but the bar has always been very much an excellent resource, substantive resource for members of the committee on both sides, and especially for me as chair. I think first about the work we've done jointly on the indigent defense issue. That was a very contentious issue just several years ago for whatever reason. We made a commitment, I think, jointly between the legislature and the bar to bring stability to the system, and I think we've done that. I see Travis Sackerson, the executive director of the council of the public defender system. In the back, I think he's doing an outstanding job, and I think we have stability in the system. I think we need more funding, which is why I introduced legislation in the last term for a permanent funding source. We fell short on that, but I think what we're seeing in the current administration, and I think through that effort, it got a lot of people's notice, and I think we've also been rewarded by the fact that we have a governor in Governor Nathan Deal who understands the importance of our indigent defense system, and as a result has plowed more resources into it. My concern about that is that Governor Deal's not going to be governor forever, only through December 31st or January something of 2019. So I do think we need a permanent funding source there because we're talking about a constitutional imperative. But we're getting better, and again, stability in that system is important. The other issue that's of greater importance to me is, of course, criminal justice reform. We passed what I think is landmark legislation this past session. That really arose out of Governor Deal's vision for doing things differently in our judicial system. And we've heard of, tough on crime and soft on crime. I think House Bill 1176, which passed unanimously through both bodies, represents a new smart on crime approach here in Georgia. When I read, and I think we're already seeing benefits by it from everything that I've been told and everything that I've studied. I read the recent report of the Criminal Justice Reform Council focusing on sort of part 2 of the adult portion and, of course, the juvenile focus of that report, and I thought it was really outstanding. I thought it was focused, I thought it was disciplined, and I thought it really reflected the passion of the people who served on that council, and the sincerity of the effort that they have to make our juvenile justice system and our greater judicial system, criminal justice system, better, more effective, more efficient, certainly more fiscally effective, but also give as many opportunities as possible for those who would benefit by an opportunity to take a different path, meaning, of course, accountability courts, community-based supervision, as opposed to taking up a hard bed in our correction system when they really don't need to be there. That's, of course, a case-by-case analysis. I think the first part of our effort bore a lot of fruit, and I think the report that was recently published clearly demonstrates that we're on the right track as it relates to how we're going to deal with juveniles in the future. Again, that went to the passion and commitment of people on the council, and especially I want to really take note and make mention of Judge Mike Boggs, who chaired the council. When I think of passion on this particular issue, I think of him. He's a good friend of ours and a former colleague of ours in the State House, and it's not surprising to me that the council put forward the outstanding piece of work product that they did under his leadership and the leadership of others who served on the council. So with that, thanks again, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, Rich. And so you'll know too, Judge Boggs is here, and he'll be speaking tomorrow to the Board of Governors on that very topic. So those of you who will be in that meeting will learn a great deal more about it from Judge Boggs. Our next panelist is special to me. He's my representative. He took my seat in the legislature and is a very effective, wonderful representative. He's an Atlanta native, Edward Lindsey, graduate of Atlanta Public Schools, Davidson College, and Georgia Law School. First elected in '04. He represents North Atlanta, Buckhead neighborhoods. He serves as Majority Whip at this point in time. That's the 4th ranking leadership position in the House. He previously served as chair of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Education, co-chair of the Republican Caucus Policy Committee, vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, serves on Appropriations, Industrial Relations, Education, Ethics, Judiciary, and Rules Committees. He serves on as one of the Georgia Commissioners to the Uniform Law Commission, a member of the Georgia Commission on Family Violence, a member of the Advisory Board to the World Congress Center, and chairman of the Conservative Policy Leadership Institute. He's been honored by a number of organizations, including Georgia Conservation Voters, the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation, the Atlanta Bar Association, Georgia Women for Change, and Georgia Academy of Family Physicians for his efforts in the legislature. Ed is a founding partner of the law firm of Goodman, McGuffey, Lindsey, and Johnson. It's a 35-lawyer litigation firm with offices in Atlanta, Savannah, Charlotte, Sarasota, and Orlando. He and his wife, Elizabeth, who is also a lawyer, live in the historic Brookhaven neighborhood. Is that the city of Brookhaven?
No.
Okay, all right. Just want to make my point there, Ed. Okay. Being a native of historic Brookhaven myself, you've caused me some confusion, but we won't go there. He lives there with his wife, Elizabeth, in historic Brookhaven, and has 3 sons. So please welcome our friend, Ed Lindsey.
Emphasize that. Emphasize it.
And thank you, Nick. And I want to remind you that I tried to call it Ashford, but my friend in the General Assembly decided to go back to Brookhaven. It just goes to show you don't win every battle in the Georgia House of Representatives or the Georgia Senate. Just to briefly echo some of the comments that have made before regarding the role of lawyers in the General Assembly. Probably our most important contribution is sometimes to simply stand up and say, no, you can't do that. I know what you're trying to do. I know what you want to do. I know that motions are high on a particular issue. I know this will be difficult to explain to your constituents back home, but you just can't do that. And I've thought about some of the issues that we've had to step in on and just go, look, you know, this may not be easy to understand back home, but it's important for us to do or not do. Rich has already touched on indigent defense. You know, not something that, you know, you're going to go back home and campaign and just garner a lot of public support for, but the fact of the matter is we as lawyers understand that you can't be tough on crime if you are not strong on defense. That's the best way and the best security of a free society. And it's up to lawyers to say, no, we have to provide for that. We had a bill not too long ago dealing with capital punishment that was real popular with some elements of our House and our Senate. And it took us lawyers in the General Assembly to sort of put up our hand and go, you know, I know what you're trying to do here. I know that you want to be tough on crime, but what you're proposing here is actually going to open up years of appeals and probably will render our existing capital punishment laws moot or overturn them. You can't do that. DUI laws is another area. We had some laws that come through from time to time in which we've got to sit down and explain to our non-lawyers that, you know, you just can't do that. You know, there's a certain thing called due process, and you can't and you can't just throw them in a hole and throw over the dirt. Judicial pay raise, another issue. Tort reform certainly is always out there. Criminal justice reform, without the lawyers in the General Assembly and without folks out here in the hallway, we never could have accomplished. Those are the kind of laws that are sometimes difficult to explain but are very, very important to our society. And without the lawyers in the General Assembly standing up and saying, you know, guys, you know, let me explain to you why you can't get there from here to where you want to get to, which gets to the importance of y'all being part of the process. You know, and my friends have already touched on that. It is vitally important for y'all to come down, and as Stacey mentioned, not just to the two judiciary committees in the House and the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, but to Ways and Means, but to Public Safety, but to all the other committees that we have that affect the lives of so many Georgians. We need to see more lawyers coming down and being part of the process. It's a fairly user-friendly system that we have in Georgia in terms of coming down and being able to testify and being heard. You know, generally speaking, your legislator will be basically just dying for your involvement and for your input. The fact of the matter is most of the General Assembly folks, they're not well versed on a lot of areas. They know the things that they came to General Assembly with, but they need a lot of education, including the lawyers. I'm pretty good. As I tell folks, you know, I'm a trial lawyer. I do the insurance defense side, but I know how to break a contract. I haven't a clue how to make one. You know, so I need folks to come in and sort of educate me on all the other nuances that we have, from probate to domestic. Well, my wife does a pretty good job at educating me on domestic. But on a lot of the other laws that we have out there, we need your input to come in and sort of help us, help educate us on these fronts. Moving to some specifics just real quickly, some things that I'd like to see us move on in addition to some things that have already been mentioned. I just completed this morning as the chairman of a human trafficking study committee. We were very proud to be able to pass in the General Assembly with near unanimous consent a human trafficking law called HB 200 in 2011 that moved us from one of the weakest states in the country in terms of our laws against this horrible crime to one of the strongest laws in the country. But there's still a lot more that needs to be done in terms of getting to the victim. And I'll have a bill that will hopefully be able to get to the victim and provide that victim with a way to get a hold of folks that can help them out. And we'll also have some expungement laws that we'll be working on in that area. Bad faith, we do have some lawyers on both sides of that issue that are talking and trying to work out a bill that will help streamline that process and have it make better sense than we have right now. And I appreciate, I look out in the audience, I see some of the lawyers on both sides that are already working on that issue, and I do appreciate it. Domestic law, there's as you mentioned, I am on the Uniform Law Commission. Paul Kurtz is the other Georgia commissioner along with me. You talk about two great opposites there. Paul Kurtz, who didn't give me a particularly great grade, and me, the two commissioners of the Uniform Law Commission. But anyway, Paul has been working for several years on a domestic law issue I think is vitally important to our servicemen who are here in our state who have to go overseas in terms of protecting their rights in domestic cases. We hope to move on that, and we've already mentioned the ethics laws and others. And I'm sure Wendell has a thing or two to mention about juvenile law. Before I conclude my remarks, since Stacey made a point of pointing out all of her Democratic members, I see I've got one of our new members, Regina Quick. We're very honored to have you as part of our caucus and part of the General Assembly. And did I miss anyone else, or did Stacey and I miss anyone else from the House or the Senate? Oh, Ron, there you are. It's good to see you too. See, Regina's wearing red, and you're wearing lawyer gray. But it's good to have both of you here. Thank you so much, and we look forward to having you both in the House.
Thank you, Ed. Lastly, Representative Wendell Willard, a good friend. He's from the 49th District in the Georgia House, first elected in 2001. Representative Willard has really been instrumental in passing several pieces of very important legislation. His notable legislative accomplishments during his time in the General Assembly include a rewrite of the Evidence Code in 2012 after a great deal of work. 2006 passage of Georgia's eminent domain law with strengthened personal property rights for all Georgians. 2004 child protection law, which protects children against reckless and abusive caregivers. Also, when I was in the legislature with Chairman Willard, he had a great success in 2005 with the creation of the city of Sandy Springs, his hometown. In recognition of his accomplishments, Chairman Willard has been honored by the Georgia Council on Aging with their Special Legislator Award, Department of Human Resources with their Leadership Award, and the Association County Commissioners of Georgia, among many others. He serves as chairman of the House Judiciary Committee and also serves on Appropriations, Ethics, ex officio of Judiciary Non-Civil, and vice chairman of the Rules Committee. Representative Willard lives in Sandy Springs with his wife, Vicki. When not working at the Capitol, he serves as a lawyer in his own private practice and also serves as a city attorney for Sandy Springs. Active in Sandy Springs and North Fulton communities, Representative Willard serves on the board of the Newtown Park Foundation. Please welcome Chairman Wendell Willard.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard all the testimony, which is now closed. It's my opportunity to give you a closing argument. I look out at the audience, I see people I've known all my career, really, and I recognize so many of you, and not trying to call names, but one of the things that's impressive is the fact we have been talking about being involved, and I see in this room so many people who have, in fact, been involved, whether it be with local issues, or local office holding, certainly the judiciary. That is, I think, a very high form of public service, and we have a number of lawyers and judges here that work in that capacity. And I commend you also for what you're doing, and it's true, we do have needs in so many places for us who have the legal training and talents to offer back that opportunity and service to our communities. And I know many of you do that, and so we need to just keep emphasizing that, especially to the younger lawyers coming along. I've said this, I came up at a different time as a lawyer. Billing hours were not the thing that drove us completely with how we practice law. It has become sort of the major force today with certainly the larger firms. Sorry, my friend. But it is something that takes away the ability of the younger lawyers, frankly, to have the opportunity to do things of service. So to the larger firms, I suggest try to recognize and open up your abilities in those firms to let the younger people have greater opportunities. I say that because I also find that in talking to people out of the larger firms, there's a tendency to have their lawyers avoid getting involved in public issues because of fear of having that firm take on a stigma of being pro or con one way or the other, which is really a limitation, I think, of the good talents that come out of firms. So I suggest that as something to keep in mind. Most of the time, they talk about bills Nick mentioned. The thing that I find as a lawyer and legislator is really what I'm doing is I'm sort of helping guide things through. It's other people's ideas, it may be other people's plans that they put together legislation. My role and job is to find within the system the working of that bill, the working of the idea, the policy, to hopefully make it good legislation. And I describe myself as sometimes like the person sitting in the wagon being pulled by a team of horses, and those horses are ones really doing the great deal of work. And we may get the credit for it, but there are so many people that have put in opportunity and work with that as really the ones that need to get the credit. But we also enjoy the limelight. People ask, well, why do you do it? Why do you go in the legislature? Well, one thing that comes to mind is I don't have to go to those CLE classes. As a legislator, one of the things I found out early when I signed, got elected is all I got to do is turn this sheet over the back side, check a box, sign my name, and send the sheet back in. But I say that facetiously, but it is a little side benefit, so I might want to keep that in mind. I think the big reason is the chance to work with policy. I call myself a policy geek. I love to take things that may be programs that we have in the state, a way of doing business in the state that needs to be improved upon. And that's what making law really is, hopefully, is you're finding a better way to accomplish a goal than what has been used by people in the past. So whether you're talking about doing an evidence code, doing something with, I got a bill coming up this year dealing with trying to give greater protection to the elderly. I don't know why they chose me to carry it, but we're going to see that maybe coming through the process. And working on, as you mentioned, on the juvenile code. That is really something that was handed to me by our dear friend Bill Hamrick, former senator, now judge. But most of the work was really done by others. The Young Lawyers Division of State Bar is the one that initiated the idea, and the need to have a recodification, we'll call it, of our juvenile code, because we had conflicting provisions in it. We had parts of it that really didn't make good sense. So there has been a rewriting of the juvenile code as a bill. It will be coming up this year. What's the history of it? Well, last year it went through the House unanimously. We held it up in the Senate because the governor had concerns, and I think justifiably so, of some costs that may be involved there that we didn't have clear answers to. So we've had this past year the Justice Reform Commission that was just mentioned earlier by Rich, and that is looked at the juvenile code and has some good policy. We're doing some things that will make, I think, the whole juvenile system of our state improve. And that's because we have a lot of things we call status offenses, whether it be playing hooky, running away from home, things that may not recognize, well, say, underage drinking. We take these juveniles a lot of times, and because there's not other ways of taking care of them, and we send them off to a state institution. And all we're doing is perfecting what may be a good child to be a problem child into really what will be later a problem adult, and problem most likely in the criminal area. So we're trying to find ways to keep the children in their community, keeping them out of a state institution, but also giving them greater oversight through a probationary type program, giving them counseling, giving them tutoring, giving them the tools they need to really stop whatever problems they're having and make better citizens out of them. I'm going to close out, Mr. Chairman, with just recognizing we've got a good team of people working with the bar down at the legislature. And they have been mentioned, but I want to mention out, we've a number of years I've been there, had great resources coming in from the bar's lobbying team. And I see Rusty back here. I saw Bill Clark. I see Jim somewhere. These people, I don't know if Meredith is here, but these are people that we as the lawyers depend on down there to bring us good information from what goes on with the bar and what the bar's interests are. You have a committee that deals with a review of legislation. I worked on that committee, and it helps to have that background as the bills come in. So I commend what y'all do, and thank you all for being here today. Happy to be with you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. All righty. What I want to do, we've got plenty of time. I will say, though, at 5 o'clock sharp, we're going to stop because that's when the bar opens. Cocktail hour begins. It's an open bar, so we don't want to miss out on that. If you have questions, I want you to go to the mic while you do that. And I might say that this room of lawyers, those of us who were planning this earlier all made bets as to whether there would be a lot of questions or not, so we're counting on you. While y'all think about your questions, I do want to introduce some judges who are here. Now, I may miss somebody because this list was given to me, so if I miss you, please let me know that you're here. And if you want to just stand briefly and we'll applaud after everybody's introduced. Justice Hugh Thompson, Judge Barnes, Judge Mike Boggs, Judge Rucker Smith, Judge Stephen Dillard, Judge Sarah Doyle, Judge Chris McFadden, Judge Philip Smith, Judge Bill Roomer, Judge John Ellington, Judge Alan Harvey. Are there some judges that I missed? Please stand. Let's see. Who would that be back there? Hey, I said Ann Barnes, I think, didn't I? Okay. All righty, great. Thank you all to you. Let's give them, our judiciary, a round of applause. All righty, does anybody want to raise a question at this point? Feel free to do so, and then if not, I've got some softballs that I can throw up to the panel here. Go ahead. If you step to the mic, just state your name and where you practice.
My name is Jeff Bramlett, and I'm a lawyer here in Atlanta. I want to commend all of you and thank you all for your public service. I want to particularly commend Senator McKoon for your devotion to the issue of ethics reform. I think you hit the nail on the head when you say that failing to live up to the standards that we like to have and the strength of our rules creates cynicism, and it's hard to govern in a society that has too much cynicism. On the subject of cynicism, I have this other topic to throw out to you. Over the course of the 30-some years I've practiced in Georgia, from time to time the General Assembly finds it appropriate to propose a constitutional amendment, which is the fundamental governing law of our state. And from time to time I've been dissatisfied with the clarity and the accuracy of the summaries that are provided to the people of Georgia when we're asked to amend our Constitution. If any of you would like to spend some time debating the accuracy of the Tort Claims Act amendment that went down 20 years ago, it'd be an interesting historic debate, or the restrictive covenant amendment that occurred to define what restraints of trade are that changed the law in Georgia. And there was one last year involving charter schools and their governance that I thought was not a model of clarity. And so I throw that out to you and to say, is there something we can do to deal with the constitutional amending process that improves the quality of the disclosure that Georgia citizens get when we are asked to amend our Constitution?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Who wants to address that? I have to say that that is a bit of a valid complaint. My mother, my sister, and my wife are always asking me to explain amendments to them, and frankly, I have a hard time doing it. So if those of us who are lawyers do, can anybody kind of enlighten us on how that works, whether or not anything can be done about it? Senator Carter?
Well, I can't enlighten you on how it works. I'll leave that to the folks at the other end of the table, but I do believe that it does a disservice to the idea that our Constitution draws its legitimacy from the people when there is an intentional or unintentional misleading of the public when we say this passed by X% when nobody knew what they were voting on. And I think that one of the problems is it's either a constitution, I guess the Constitution itself could be amended to say, to provide some judicial oversight of that process, because the way that that Constitution has been interpreted, the provision of the Constitution that asks for amendments has been interpreted in a way that essentially forgoes judicial oversight about the accuracy of the ballot description. So I think that's one potential option, and I know it sounds convoluted, but this is a group of lawyers, and that's one answer. And I would love to know more about how the questions get written.
Yeah.
Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I'll try.
Oh, Edward?
Yeah. The problem is, trying to boil a 3 or 4 page constitutional amendment down to 1 or 2 sentences. That is always going to be difficult to try to come up with some language in which it's going to perfectly encompass all the different nuances of that sometimes complicated constitutional amendment. You've got several choices. You could have judicial review, as Jason mentioned, but the problem with that is that you end up with a conflict of the separation of powers, because that same court is going to later have to try to interpret that law, and quite frankly going to probably be challenged in terms of whether or not the language that was used in the proposed constitutional amendment was in fact misleading or not. So you've got that problem. You could take the voters out altogether from the process. We don't have the voters in the United States vote on constitutional amendments to the U.S. Constitution, but that's anti-democratic, and I don't think that we would want to do that. The best way to deal with this, quite frankly, is to have, in particular, the bar become more active in terms of educating the public on what constitutional amendments mean, both in terms of at the original point of which it's composed, and in terms of educating the voters as that constitutional amendment goes on the ballot down the road. Something I've been advocating for a long time is quite frankly getting the bar and getting other entities more actively involved, or just providing basic information on judicial elections, for instance, because we have the same problem with judicial elections, folks knowing exactly who they're voting for a judge. We live in a society in which we want to vote on things, and so taking away that power to vote is almost impossible. But then we don't, some of us who are in the know, like lawyers, don't step up and help educate the public. And one thing I would like to see my bar do over the next few years is try to figure out a way to come up with what would be the best way that we could educate folks on what exactly constitutional amendments mean. How the language is come up with, basically it's decided in committee and then on the floor of the House and the Senate. And it's a hotly debated issue every year as to whether or not it fully and completely encompasses the meaning of the proposed constitutional amendment. Sometimes, you know, the language I don't agree with. I had one particular constitutional amendment. I think I proposed different language twice, put it in and then got it taken back out at another committee level. So it is a hotly contested issue, but I think the best way in the long run is for the bar, quite frankly, to figure out ways that we can step up and help educate the general public as to what exactly is going on. What I tell folks, one last point,
Sure.
is that, you know, my name on the ballot with an R by it doesn't tell you a thing about who I am either. It takes a campaign to do that. And it takes a campaign, and it takes folks educating the public on who I am, to sort of explain to who I am versus who my opponent is. And so I'm going to throw a lot of it back on the bar, Jeff.
Let me raise this question. How many amendments are there to the Georgia Constitution? Anybody know? Hundreds? How many amendments come out on average per session, would you say, per year?
2 or 3 probably come out. It's on every 2 years you have it on the ballot.
Because my question would be this, Mr. Chairman, maybe you could, what is it that motivates, it seems to me that this is just an observation, I don't want to dominate this, but that some of the stuff that we get constitutional amendments on are things that really don't need to be a constitutional amendment. I may be the only one in the room who thinks that. But what is it that raises an issue to the constitutional amendment level from the legislator's perspective? Why an amendment? Is there a standard for that?
The standard would be, oh, go ahead.
No, please.
The standard would be the fact that the Constitution speaks of one means, the current Constitution speaks of one means of addressing an issue, and now you're looking at doing a different approach. You've got to go to the body of the Constitution and make that amendment speak. And I guess I'll use one is the question of the restrictive covenant, which was one of my bills, and the point what we were doing there was to recognize the Supreme Court has said because of our right to work clause of the Constitution, you could not have laws that limited a person's ability to seek employment. So we had to go into the Constitution as a way of accomplishing what was the desire of many people, lawyers, business community, otherwise, and it was looked upon as also being an economic barrier in our state by not having that ability, because a lot of major companies were fearful of having certain employees come here with information and background and documents that we could not control through restrictive covenants. So there had to be a way to do it. You say the language wasn't explaining it maybe, and I suggest, Jeff, we could give that same provision to 20 different lawyers to write it, and you'll come out with 20 different ways. I think what the Supreme Court has said addresses whatever we can say. The purpose of the language on the ballot is just to call the attention to the public that there is a Constitution amendment, and you need to become familiar with what the language is. And I think that's what the Supreme Court has, I don't speak for the Supreme Court, maybe, but I think many times this has been raised at the appellate level, and that's been what they said. You know, this is a legislative action, and the whole purpose behind it is to bring to the attention there is this amendment, and you need to know what it says.
Representative Abrams?
I would say that there are two ways we can approach this. One is the preamble, which made a fairly dramatic appearance this year. That is a political statement that goes above the constitutional amendment. And certainly the process that sets the language in the constitutional amendment, there is robust debate about how that happens. And it typically is that the people who don't like it lose. And that's why you get the language you get. The preamble, however, which was the sort of bold-faced statement that went above that, that is entirely a political space. There's nothing democratic about how that happens, and I think that is deeply problematic, and I'm using small d democratic in that. And so I do think that there is some investigation we need to do into whether or not that needs to remain. I will, and I think big D Democrats put it in place, so you go hoist by your own petard when you don't like it. But I do think there's something to be said for at least winnowing down to the collective action of the body what we get angry about in the issue. I think the second point, and I actually agree with Edward Lindsey about this, I think Edward is correct that this is a campaign issue. But I think constitutional amendments need to have a greater parity. We are fundamentally changing how we operate as a state. And to your question about the number of amendments we have, Georgia had one of the densest most densely amended constitutions until I think it was '86. I think Louisiana only exceeded us, but we used to amend it every time we had a thought. And luckily we have constrained ourselves, and I think admirably so. We've reduced the number of amendments, but still we are fundamentally changing how we operate as a state. And unlike a candidate who can self-select how active they will be or will not be in promoting themselves, I do think that when we're having this type of debate, education of our citizens is the most critical. And so I would argue that there should be some public funding of the campaigns that go out to describe those amendments. I do think that relying on the body of the bar to have that responsibility is not, certainly it's a good idea and should be a part of that, but I do think that there should be some conversation about whether or not there is a public ethic to funding campaigns on both sides, because there is not always parity in access to resources when you're for or against an issue. I'm not speaking to how much money we spent on 1162, but I would say that anytime something goes on the ballot, when the people have to decide, the people deserve the best resources to make sure that they get to make good decisions.
Thank you, thank you. Another question from the audience yet? Yes, step on over, Steve, to the mic. While you do that, Chairman Willard, might I ask you, there was an article today in the paper about the juvenile justice system in Georgia, which was a bit disturbing in terms of, the success and the money spent. Was that accurate? I mean,
I didn't read the article. I haven't had a chance to look at the paper yet.
Like it's $90,000.
It is. That's the thing we're battling with. When you put that child, I call it either child in trouble or troubled child in a state institution, you're costing the state $250+ per day. That's pretty. I mean, I can stay here for probably less than that. But you got all the expenses that go with it. Can you?
Thought, I guess.
But you have all that, the education, the clothing, the medical, the teaching, counseling rather, and so all that has to go into it. You can do much of that in their own community, and hopefully stay in their own home, or they can stay in like a foster home situation, and you're bringing the cost down to somewhere around $50 a day. So bingo, there's got to be a better way to crack this nut than what we've been doing. And I think that's what we're fighting with, and I think everybody sees that as not just the saving the money, but the saving of the lives, the saving of these youth who have strayed for some reason. I joke and say the only difference between them and me is I didn't get caught. And the joke, folks. But I mean, a lot of people did silly, stupid things in their youth, and maybe you didn't get caught. But if you did get caught, then you get into the system, and bingo, it's a lot of problems trying to straighten out that child once they've been pushed off into a state institution.
And the other statistic which sort of shocked me was it said like 38% of those in detention are nonviolent offenders. I assume that's something that the legislation would be aimed at.
And recidivism is where we're talking about. The recidivism of that child coming back again to the system, whether it be juvenile or adult, is 65% plus. So we ain't doing it right. A lot of states have changed. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. These are things that have been done in other jurisdictions successfully, and we're just trying to pick up on what they did and reform it to our own system in Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anybody else have a comment on that? Okay, name and city?
Stephen Libel, Dahlonega, Georgia. I'm just interested in light of what's going on in Washington now. Do you expect any additional legislation coming forward on gun rights and the use of firearms in Georgia during this coming session?
Rich?
There won't be any gun control measures that pass the General Assembly this session. I feel extremely confident about that. If you're talking about an expansion of gun rights, we've had bills that have passed in the last several years, House Bill 89, several years ago, Senate Bill 308, if I remember correctly, in 2010. So periodically we have, over the course of the last several years, gone through the effort of expanding what the governing majority believes is a fundamental right. And my sense is that there will be consideration of several bills this year. There have been several bills that have already been pre-filed. That does not mean that they'll all be considered, but generally what you've seen over the last several years is moving that issue toward an expansion of that fundamental right.
Well, I think what I'm more interested in is the issue of the rights of homeowners and gun rights with regard to sport shooting ranges in Georgia. There's been a tension between people who are near those areas that have sport shooting ranges, especially ones that are in more suburban areas, and that has not been regulated, nor has there been any legislation that I've seen that has come out concerning that tension between the rights of property owners and the rights of gun owners. We don't have a statewide noise ordinance, and I just was curious as to whether or not that's going to be on the horizon as well, because all of these tensions come in.
Thank you, Steve.
My sense is that no, that would not be addressed by the General Assembly, that we would leave what strikes me as an inherent noise/nuisance issue to the local jurisdictions, but I'll defer to my city attorney on my right to speak to that as well.
It's zoning, and zoning is by the Constitution limited only to the local jurisdictions, not the states. So you're trying to control how property is used. That does come under land use, and that's zoning.
Let me ask this question. Yeah, go on to the mic while we're waiting. And anybody feel free to pick up on this. I assume, and I'm not that apprised of the issues, but I assume as it relates to the budget, a lot of what happens in Washington is going to affect what you do, right? How do you think, and maybe Senator, some of the senators who have been quiet down on the end, on the far right end, might address that, if you have any thoughts about how it's going to affect y'all's operation, your schedule, with appropriations and having to wait for decisions from Congress. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Go ahead.
I'm not one that's been quiet. I mean,
yeah. Senator Cowsert, do you have any thought on that? Or I can go with Chairman Willard, but for getting here late, he sure is talking a lot.
I don't think any of us know that answer that right now, but obviously a good chunk of our state budget is federal funds, and if we're having a cut back through sequestration or whatever they end up doing, it's going to have a direct impact on us.
Yeah, we had that happen 2 years ago, was it? We stayed in session a lengthy time because we were waiting for the Congress to make a determination what they were going to do with the funding of Medicaid, which was a big hole in our budget. And I'm told we're going to be facing the same thing this time. We don't have answers about Medicaid, and it may not come until the end of February or early March. So it may cause us to stay in session to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir, Senator.
Just to give you an idea of the dollars we're talking about, the general budget hovers around $19 billion, but the state of Georgia spends about $39 billion, And the difference comes from several sources, non-tax sources, but the largest is federal funding. So we are at considerable risk in what happens.
Thank you very much. Okay, name and location.
I'm Gary Jackson, a judge in the Atlanta Municipal Court.
Yes, Judge.
And I'm speaking as legislative co-chair along with Judge Barrett in Duluth of the Municipal Council of Judges. Someone did remark it's 40 days and 80 nights, but actually it's more than that. I've been working with Representative Golick in the Title 40 Study Committee, and I commend all of you. It's a lot of work. You're overworked and underpaid, and it's a tremendous sacrifice, and we need more to do that. But I did want to alert those in attendance today. The Title 40 Committee has been working very, very hard. They've looked at decriminalizing traffic, which has a lot of moving parts. Probable cause that would lead to other arrests and budget considerations on state surcharges. One of the things that's come out of that, and I wanted to call it to the panel's attention, is a program that we're going to look at to collect delinquent unpaid fines through the interception of state income tax refunds. This program has worked in a number of other states. Wisconsin, last fiscal year I looked, collected $22 million. And I wanted to get the panel's reaction. The concept is you've had a day in court, you have a fine, it's unpaid, you violated probation. And the program is to say when your state income tax comes in, we're going to intercept that portion of the fine and add the cost of that interception to that amount such that it would be offender funded and optional for the courts. It would be user optional. Processes are in place in the event of identity fraud, and the funds would not be immediately seized but held in escrow so that the taxpayer offender would have an opportunity to challenge. And we're looking at that, and I'm curious as to the panel's reaction. Hard to predict how many millions of dollars would be collected, but this program has been very successful in a number of other states, and we've sent this information to some of you. We'll get around to all of you later. But Representative Golick, of course, you have worked very hard on this Title 40 committee. If you could comment on the Title 40 committee and where you think the study committee is going to go.
Thank you.
The study, and this is a House study committee, it has looked at many various moving parts of Title 40, which of course
has the uniform rules of the road.
Right,
yes.
And there are a lot of different moving parts to those moving parts. Among them teen driving, the potential reclassification of certain traffic offenses, amongst other considerations, ignition interlock devices. There was a push this past session on the part of some to go ahead and mandate that on a first DUI. Of course, judges already have that ability right now, and they choose not to do that within their discretion. And we have judges in order to exercise discretion. So there's the possibility of movement on the issue as it relates to ignition interlock device if the blood alcohol content level rises to a certain threshold, 0.15, 0.16. These are all items that are under discussion, but in no way are they part of any sort of final report or recommendation on the part of the committee. The tax intercept, to answer your question directly on a delinquent fine, my understanding is that we have intercept right now. Tax intercept right now on a there's
unemployment fraud and
there are
things
various,
of that nature, myriad of things.
Various provisions where there is an intercept already in place, and the proposal will be to go ahead and to put a delinquent traffic fine, add that to that list. That's under consideration, but in no way is that a recommendation to the House, at least as of now.
All righty. Thank you, Judge. Yes, Paula.
Okay. Hi. Good afternoon, representatives. As a former member of
name and city.
My name is Patrice Perkins Hooker, and I'm a citizen of Atlanta.
Thank you.
As a former member of the Real Property Law Section and a current member of the Advisory Committee on Legislation, I just want to thank you and express my appreciation for what a lot of you all have done with less sexy, less controversial, and less publicized issues that really impact the day-to-day lives of citizens in Georgia. And some of those issues that you all have supported and some of the members who've been involved with them are like the air property litigation and legislation we got through There was a UCC bill with Representative Lindsey, the transfer fees legislation that was championed, heralded, and even we had to explain what it was by Representative Willard, Lindsey, and Senator Stone. And then the good funds legislation that was introduced and kind of pushed through by Representative Willard. These things never made the headlines, but they impacted people dearly, and we do appreciate your support for the lesser known issues that bar sections bring to your attention and need to be addressed for the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let me also add to my thanks to Ms. Hooker, because she was one of the people who came down and helped out so tremendously to explain the human side of the heirs property bill, which could seem rather dry until you actually talked about how it would impact people. And she did a great job, and I look forward to seeing each of you come down here and do as good a job as she did on that bill, which passed unanimously out of the House and the Senate.
I do want to, since Patrice mentioned it, I do want to bring up the fact that the Advisory Committee on Legislation has a number of proposals which our lobbying team will be putting your way, and I did want to give you fair notice of this, that the fiduciary section of the bar presented, and it passed the committee, a proposal that would modify the current rule against perpetuities, to changing the vesting period from 90 to 360 years. And of course, you know, it was the first time that I had heard the rule against perpetuity since I graduated from law school. So the committee did study that. The committee did study that, and that will be coming your way.
Is the committee going to offer Barbary refunds if we eliminate the rule against perpetuities?
We'll run that by the board.
Nick, we'll look at it as soon as you can explain the unborn widow.
Yeah, exactly. I don't see any other questions. We've got yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Hi, my name is Carl, Atlanta, Georgia. Representative Abrams mentioned that attorneys should get involved in things like ways and means in the budget. I'm wondering if you all could talk with us a little bit. What can we expect to see next year on some of the budget issues? It looks like revenues are going up a little bit, about 10% I read. There was some legislation last year on tax reform. What are some of the things that we should look for, and how can we get involved?
Who would like to address that?
The one person who doesn't actually have influence on the budget. I will say this, from what I've read, I think, well, I will say this, tax reform, for example, there were a number of tax lawyers who helped inform that process over the 2 years. And I do think there are probably going to be some tweaks to the law we passed last year, which was fairly comprehensive, 386. From what I understand from Chairman O'Neill and from Chairman Chanel, I don't see a lot of energy behind doing more substantive tax reform. And I think, and certainly will yield to my colleagues, when it comes to, while revenues may be ticking up a bit, you know, Georgia's in a bit of a structural deficit situation. And as Senator Stone pointed out, we spend a lot of money in the state. Unfortunately, we spend less per capita than most states, but our problems aren't cheaper. And so I do think we're climbing back out of a hole that we've been in for a while. And so while I think we will be able to make smarter decisions than we have in the past, I don't think there's cause for celebration yet. I will say there are two areas that aren't related directly to revenue, to our revenues, but are related to the funds that come from the lottery. The governor was foresighted enough to say that he's going to increase the number of days, return us to a full 180 days for pre-K. There's conversation about increasing the amount that goes into the Hope Scholarship. I think we hopefully have stopped cuts to our education budget as a wholesale matter, although we now need to talk about what we want to do with the money we do have, and I think that's going to be a robust debate this year. And so I'll yield to everyone else to tell me why I'm wrong.
Can I make a quick comment?
Senator Carter.
Just one thing that lawyers can do, everybody, just as informed people. We have a very limited ability at the state level to break through the national rhetoric. And when you hear about the national government's debt issues, when you hear about the national government's spending problems that I frankly think need to be addressed, I mean, just let people know that, again, as I said at the very beginning, your state government is one of the smallest in the country. There's only 2 states that spend less per capita than Georgia. And we balance our budget every single year by constitutional mandate. So much of the rhetoric about government taxing and government spending that is rightfully focused on Washington does a real disservice when people try to apply it in Atlanta. And so one of the things that I think is important for everybody is to engage in an education process of folks that says, look, you know, whether you've got a problem with the size of the national government or the national debt, et cetera, we don't live in a state that has those issues. We have different issues in the state of Georgia that we need to address and deal with. So I think that's something that anyone can do at any point in the process, is just make sure that people get educated and we don't get dragged into the national rhetoric when you're talking about our state government.
Rick, Senator
I think that I appreciate Senator Carter's comment on that. And that's something that, I don't know about you, but whenever I have a town hall meeting, the first thing I explain is that we're not Congress and how we're different. And get some separation there. Whereas they have the problems that they have, we don't have those problems. We balance our budget, as Senator Carter said. We have a AAA bond rating from all major rating agencies. Our bonded indebtedness is manageable, it's conservative, it's responsible. There are a lot of things that we could do better. I think we'd all acknowledge that publicly and privately. But as a practical matter, relative to the national government and relative to many of our fellow states that are in serious fiscal trouble in terms of unfunded pension liabilities, deficits, and all kinds of other problems, we're in pretty good shape. We don't pat ourselves in the back too hard, don't worry. But I couldn't agree more that, you know, we live in a special place, in a special state. Thank goodness that we have a balanced budget amendment. And I never thought I would say this, but years ago, I never thought that a balanced budget amendment would really truly be necessary because, of course, folks would come to their senses in Washington on both sides of the aisle. But now we've come to the point where people who thought, oh, that just really wasn't, it's not really necessary. That's such a big undertaking. We couldn't possibly do it. It's now come to the point where I'm hearing in my town hall meetings, and my sense is my colleagues are as well, the understanding and the acknowledgement that in the absence of that a balanced budget amendment is truly necessary for our national government. With that little bit of rhetoric off to the side, let me address one quick response to yours. I've experienced over the last 14 years, folks think that, that somehow we're, drawing the analogy with Congress, there's a perception that with all the staff and all the layers of people and different offices that you just sort of can't break through. Again, drawing that contrast, we don't have that. We are about as accessible as air. And if you go to any one of the committees, whether it's judiciaries or any of the other committees, if somebody wants to be heard, they're going to be heard. I think the key is to go ahead and to be well-versed in the subject matter that's being addressed, be prepared to answer questions, which I think everyone in this room is usually pretty prepared to answer questions, and be an asset, because we need those assets. We do not have full-time, we have some full-time staff, Office of Legislative Counsel, but from a subject matter expert standpoint, we don't have that staff. We simply do not, which is why we're so grateful for the subject matter experts in the bar. But it will not, no one will ever take it on either side of the aisle. No one will ever take it as an attorney or anyone else, frankly, injecting themselves into an issue where they're not wanted. Number one, that perspective is wanted, it is needed, and it is welcome. And the last time I checked, it's secured by the First Amendment, right? So I'd ask you to, I'd plead for you to go ahead and exercise that, get involved, because you have a background, whatever that may be, that I guarantee you members of a particular committee don't have. A lot of us are generalists. We have to be. But there are times when subject matter expertise is critically important. And if we don't have it, a disservice could occur. So help us prevent that. I appreciate your
Thank you. I had one more hand, right? And while you come, we're getting near the end. But go ahead. And I wanted to ask Senator McKoon, because he mentioned it in his opening, and he's been quiet. You obviously are interested in ethics. Would you like to take a moment or two to kind of give us a primer of where we are with it, what to expect? And I assume we're talking about lobbyists or caps on gifts as opposed to campaign contributions, or both. Could you just enlighten us a little bit on your thoughts there?
Sure. Well, in the Senate, the Lieutenant Governor appointed a study committee on ethics reform following the election, and we have had 3 meetings. We have discussed the topic of ending the practice of unlimited giving. We've also discussed at length the need for restoring the Commission's rulemaking authority to be able to handle those situations that we have not necessarily anticipated in the statutes that they are being called upon to enforce. And we've also had a significant discussion about this local filing issue that I mentioned earlier. In terms of how it's going to be addressed, I mean, I think that's an open question at this point. I know that there's a bipartisan task force in the House that has also been meeting, and I think, you know, we're going to see some bills introduced pretty soon, and they'll work through the process, and hopefully we'll come out at the end of that with an agreement on a lot of these issues. I would underline that while the gift limit has gotten an unbelievable amount of attention, there are a lot of other collateral issues that are related that do need to be addressed in terms of our conflict of interest rules and a variety of other issues within the code that I think deserve attention as well. So I hope that will happen as we go through the process. But at least on the Senate side, I can tell you that we've had several committee meetings and a good open dialogue about those 3 aspects of the ethics issue.
Thank you very much, Senator. If you'll step forward, we have time for one more question. I think Chairman Willard indicated to me that Chief Justice Hunstein had come in. Is that correct?
Well,
yes, please be recognized. Thank you for being here.
Robert Barker, City of Atlanta. Question for all of you. Last session, and I appreciated Representative Lindsey's comments about how the lawyers are in the legislature to try to make sure that issues don't have some sort of legal vetting before they come to the fore. But last session, SB 448 passed the Senate unanimously, and it would have impaired the obligation of contracts in 3 different ways. It impaired guarantees. It changed the interest rate in the underlying contract, and it changed any documents for the sale by preventing rescissory rights. So my question is, before something like that passes the Senate unanimously, what kind of input was obtained from the bar or lawyers representing creditors or something else?
Ask the Senate.
Ask the Senate. Only thing I'll add is that there's a reason why we have 2 chambers.
And we stopped it.
Okay.
Sometimes they fix our mistakes, and sometimes we fix theirs.
That's right. That's right.
So I'll leave that to my friend.
Unless the Senate has a rebuttal on that, it is 5 o'clock. If you'd like to make a comment, you can, but the bar is open. All right. Well, listen, let's give this group a robust round of applause.
Thank you, panelists. Also, thank you, Nick Moratakis.
Look forward to seeing you Monday.
Likewise, sir.
Be with you for a while.
Panelists, we also have a token of appreciation for your being here today, and I'll hand each of these to you, the State Bar Challenge coin. Go ahead and have a drink. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it.